So to take a quote from the strategic initiative around policy engagement, this was really what we thought of as being the guiding principle for policy engagement, was providing the expertise and the insight that we have in the W3C community to basically help inform good policy, so that we've spent some time learning about things that work and don't work on the web. Collectively, we have a lot of technical knowledge. We would like to be able to provide that to inform policies that lead to a healthy web and a thriving web community. So I'll give the policy engagement task force information, similar to what Sylvia said. We had our kickoff in October. We also have the communication hub for you to find out more, to find out various updates, snapshots of what we've done over the quarter. And getting in touch is always welcome, so we have a dedicated email address for that. And I want to highlight and thank the members of the task force. We have several people here who collectively have many years of experience working in regulatory spaces, or who were instrumental in helping to guide this work and continue to guide this work. And I'm incredibly grateful for the time that they've given us to shape the direction of this work. So fundamentally, why are we engaging with policymakers? We do know that regulations come out that have an effect on the web. There are many things happening affecting online spaces, with how we can interact online, our access to resources, to content, our ability to connect with people. So all of these, ideally, when regulations come out, they would align with the mission of having one web for everyone. But of course, sometimes regulations come out that are not grounded in technical understanding, not knowing what things are possible, what different options might be available, what the unintended side effects of making certain choices might be. And so that is a place where we feel we may be able to contribute and to guide towards a better result. And if policy decisions are made also in isolation, you may have a very fragmented web. And if we have one interoperable World Wide Web that is worldwide and interoperable, then we would like this to be supported through the regulatory space as much as possible. We also know that governments themselves make use of technical standards. They will be referenced in regulation. Governments will sometimes put requirements for using a particular standard. It may be part of a contract that you use, for example, an open standard. They want to be efficient as well and not reinvent the wheel and use what we've provided. But they themselves might not be in a working group. Sometimes they are, which is terrific, particularly in the digital identity space, but they may not be. And if they are going to engage with us, they might need a little bit of help. I think many of us have spent time learning the culture and the acronyms and the tools and the processes. And this can be a bit daunting if you're someone coming in for the first time, for example, or even the second or the third time, to figure out how it is that you can engage with us, where the most relevant work might be being done, how you might work with us or get information which doesn't involve necessarily, for example, joining a group and directly working on the standard. And so we want to be able to provide them assistance where we can. Well, in terms of the types of engagement that we envision, definitely the main focus is about communicating and coordinating. That is the central focus of this work. So we want to be able to provide technical information. So information that's relevant, presented in a way that is accessible to a policymaker, which can be challenging. And if people are going to be involved in the standards process, as I mentioned, find out a way that works for them. What might work that is in our process? Might we think about other avenues that might work for them as well? We're always open to trying new things that might work for a policymaker. We also want to be a convener for some discussions. So if we are going to have different groups who are talking about a common regulatory issue in the technical space, then we may be a place to bring people together to have a deep and sustained discussion on some very complex topics. And we may be able to track particular technical policy issues. We have a community of people who are seeing things in different regions, in different domains, and finding ways of bringing this information together so that it becomes a place for people to become informed. So the task force were great in giving some guidance. We had a lot of discussions about what they thought were important things for us to bear in mind as we began this work. Clearly, a big message there was that we have to prioritize. We only have so many people and so many cycles to do work. It's difficult to cover all of the countries and all of the topics, so we need to be strategic. Now, we already have a lot of relationships built in places, particularly the EU and the United States, and so we continue to deepen those, but also we'd like to branch out somewhat. And so we're looking at using the W3C chapters, for example, as one way to extend our reach. People there already have some relationships in their regions. They understand the context of regulations in that space, and so we want to leverage that as much as possible. And I'll, of course, mention that it's very useful for me to be in China. For me, this is my first trip to China, and I welcome discussion and connection with anyone who wants to talk to me. I'm also here tomorrow. We don't yet have a breakout, but if people would like a side meeting or a breakout on this, then I am eager and willing to have such meetings because I want to take advantage of being here with local people who I'm sure have many useful insights that they would like to share with me about having regulatory policymaking discussions in the region. Now, we're also looking on focusing on broad topics and, again, core principles. We're not looking to chase down very specific regulations in a state, for example, that are trying to do a very specific piece of legislation. There are many reasons why that's not the right level of engagement. We're looking at initiatives around higher level principles, for example, fragmentation of the internet or freedom of expression or privacy and regulations that are having impacts on these larger level issues rather than chasing down particular regulations. This is not lobbying shaped. This is more about trying to hold to the vision of W3C. The task force also indicated how important it was to convey the scope of the work to the members in the community. So that's some of what I'm doing here and with our communications hub. We know that the members themselves often have their own policy efforts going on, their own government affairs. They have their own particular goals. So that's something that we're not getting in the way of. That's something where our focus is more broad. We're looking more at the alignment of W3C with the mission and the vision and the values of W3C broadly. Although we, of course, welcome all the work and the input that we get from the members and what they're hearing in their own efforts and connections with people in government and regulatory spaces. This will be, I think, a theme we also heard this morning about connecting with peer organizations as much as possible. There was mention, for example, of IETF, for example. We have other peers who are facing similar challenges. We should definitely work together, learn from them, and have collective impact on regulations that have impact on the internet and on the web. Hopefully we can all collectively work towards a better future. We also want to find ways of having policymakers engage with us in an effective way, again, that works for them. As I mentioned earlier, there may not be going to join a working group. So what might make sense for different groups? How do they engage? How do they connect with us? Might they want to find ways of asking us technical questions where we can find a way to make time to speak with someone to clarify some technical point, for example? That might be something they need to help them in their work. There has to be a balance struck as well. Some discussions require confidentiality when you were talking to regulators, which we respect, but we also know that openness is an important value of the organization. So this is something where we are going to try to balance those two as much as possible so that we can have productive discussions, but also have the appropriate level of transparency. And also the task force members mentioned that it's useful for us to show that we have a benefit to a policymaker. It's like, why would they want to speak to us unless we can show that it's worth their time? And we also, it was noted that technical expertise, which is what we have in great amounts, is something that is particularly valued. So a thing we can bring to the table is this technical expertise. So finding a way to disseminate that, clearly, easily is something that is I guess, unique selling point in some ways of the organization that we can help clarify technical matters. So to give a bit of an illustration, I think we already heard a little bit about age verification from me about regulation yesterday. This is probably not the last time you're going to be hearing about this, hopefully maybe not at this meeting, but in general, this is a topic that is very persistent. This has been very fast-moving legislation. There have been regulations coming out quickly, maybe sometimes ahead of the analysis that might have helped to shape the regulation. Many risks coming out of these regulations. For example, fragmenting of the internet, because there will be different, again, different experiences, different ability to access content in different regions. There are privacy concerns around collecting credentials, sensitive information, various documents, and whether you have access at all. Is there freedom of expression? Can you connect to websites, and are you able to connect with others online? So all of these can be at risk with poorly formed legislation. So we had a workshop jointly with the IAB in October of last year with a lot of different stakeholders from different areas. We had regulators, we had industry, browser folks, we had age verification people, civil society, researchers, all came together to discuss some of these complex questions. And the report, which is in a draft version right now, it was designed to be a resource for policy discussion and development. The actual goal was to have something that then regulators could look at to help them answer some of these questions and think about potential side effects of the regulation. Also, we knew because of regulators, there were some confidentiality concerns, as I mentioned earlier, so this was a place where we did Chatham House rule to say that we could report on what was said, but not who said it, was something that was set up, again, process-wise, to facilitate discussion and participation by regulators. So discussions on this topic are ongoing, and I will flag that during the breakout days that we had last month. We had a discussion around doing a community group as a way of bringing together people to continue the discussion, and that had support from the people who were on the call as a way of continuing the discussion among people who are thinking about, how do we come up with discussion points for communication, how do we bring folks together from the different perspectives to have ongoing communication. This might be one way. So we are looking at spinning up a community group. So in terms of some outcomes that we think we will have, these will be, again, focused around communication and collaboration, trying to find some mechanisms for identifying and tracking relevant policy issues. So again, for people who are doing analysis of these and ways of sharing information for others in the community. So there may be organizations who are already collecting this that we help to disseminate. Do we have a mailing list people can subscribe to get highlights of policy issues that might be of interest? Newsletters or posts on social media, sort of ways of making it easy for members in the community to know about things that are happening that are relevant in the technical policy space. Also making places for people to collaborate on technical policy issues. So as I mentioned, for example, a community group, maybe we have more workshops like there was for the age verification workshop. Maybe do we have some kind of a forum where people can get together and have ongoing discussions about these. We also want to be able to contribute to some efforts in policy development. So sometimes there may be a public consultation where we might want to submit a statement. There may be a joint statement with some other groups, let's say like IETF or similar groups, somewhere where we can provide, again, our technical input. And looking towards education and outreach. So maybe we make some explainers on some topics, maybe training materials. And I will note, again, an outcome from the breakout days was we were taking an example from the Policymaker program that happens at the IETF by the Internet Society, where they will they'll bring in people in policy-making spaces, people who work for governments, bring them into a session, and then talk about internet architectures, so technical subjects, helping them understand how standards are made. And we are planning to do a pilot at TPAC this year of this, learning from what the Internet Society did, and hopefully getting that off the ground and helping to get some information to some policymakers. So in terms of some highlights, a couple of upcoming events. So in Brussels next month, there is a workshop ahead of the CPDP data protection conference, where there is a small workshop on web standards for data protection. So I will be at that workshop. Among other topics, the global privacy control will be discussed, and talking about how those fit into the regulatory space. We also put forth a proposed session in the ICANN meeting that's coming up in Seville this summer. So what happens at this ICANN meeting is the Governmental Advisory Committee has several people globally who work in different agencies, for example, digital ministries or innovation, other technical bodies. They're all coming into one big space. It's felt like we have a group full of global representatives. Why not take advantage of this to perhaps introduce them to W3C, the nature of the work that we do, and hopefully we will be able to do that in the next couple of months. And then we'll be able to build some bridges across the world, all from one very large room. And in the next horizon, if you want to have policy engagement, it's sustained engagement. So this will go beyond the task force into how do we continue this work in the future, because this is something that will have a life that will continue. So we need a structure. We will have to figure out how to run something. For example, does it have a steering committee? How do we bring in people like the AB, for instance, who have a priority to work on policy issues? So how do we bring in groups like the chapters and other regions and expertise around all of these issues, and make a structure that will be sustaining and effective over the long term. So ultimately, we want to have the policy outcomes to help make the web work for everyone. And this is one piece, the beginning of our engagement. We've been very active, and we look forward to more of this work in the future.